Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlocked Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. And tonight, or afternoon, wherever, tonight we're going to deal with an idea and concept that I think it's very pertinent to what's going on today for anyone who has been examining the way the media behaves. Okay? And when I say media, I don't mean all the media. I'm talking about the corporate media. You know who they are. The big networks, the big corporate newspapers, that everyone just kind of seems to feel are, they kind of are the default source of information and analysis. And, of course, not everyone, but I mean that in a general sense. Now, before I begin, though, with this analysis that I think you're going to find very, very fascinating, because I haven't actually seen this analysis in this way presented anywhere. So, let's go ahead and begin in just a moment. But first, I'm going to encourage people to, if you're listening to this later, on YouTube, then go up to the corner there, where it has my official website, and click that on. You can find all kinds of related articles about these topics. And if you're, a fan of alternative history and science fiction, you might, just check out my new work, The Destiny of Our Past. Just search that, The Destiny of Our Past. It's a detective thriller set during the era of Noah. Anyway, let's get on with the topic. Now, my premise with this show is to say that the corporate media, what sometimes people call mainstream media, is psychopathic as an institution. That's right, psychopathic. Now, while psychopathy is an individual diagnosis, there are those who have, taken this in the concept of analyzing institutions. And I would like to go through around, let's say, 13 of the criteria for someone to be, if it's an individual, to be labeled a psychopath. And I want to see if it matches the way the corporate media operates. Okay? So let's go ahead and begin. 13 of the criteria. Now remember, there's 20 criteria altogether. You don't have to have a yes answer or a most of the time answer for all 20 for the label of psychopathy. Even a significant number indicates concern. So I've dealt with this on previous shows, borderline psychopaths. The people that are kind of close, but not quite psychopathic. You got to kind of watch out for them too. All right? But let's go ahead and begin. Now, the first criteria I'd like to go through is the idea, and I'm taking this from the Test for Psychopathy. You can look this up at the website Arkanside. And I've checked these. These are the general criteria you'll find out there. You'll find it on a lot of different websites and so forth. But this is where I'm taking the questions from. Okay, number one, if you're trying to rate your subject, in this case the corporate media, the first criteria we could look at is glib and superficial charm. To be smooth talker, engaging, almost verbally seductive, not really afraid to say anything, and not letting the culture get in the way of how you go about your business. Oh my gosh, doesn't that fit the media at every level? Think about it. How many times, when you turn on the so-called news, network news, what kind of people do they have on there? Do they have average-looking people? When you go to Europe, actually, you'll see people that are I'm not saying there's any different really, but you will see people that look more, I would say, average, that are doing broadcast journalism, whereas in America you seem to have these kind of cardboard cutouts, caricatures, so to speak, for both males and females. At least, that just seems to be the rule. And think about how they talk. Very engaging. These people at the highest national levels of media, whether it be written journalism or the kind where they're paid millions of dollars a year to deliver the news, they learn how to present information. They learn how to even, if it's filmed, they know how to even have their eyes positioned, how their eyebrows should behave, so to speak, when they are delivering a certain broadcast. And these little non-verbal pieces of body language actually can have a great influence on the viewer. It can convey trustworthiness. It can convey truth, even when that person is not really delivering the truth. And when it comes to the media in general, like in print, you can see this all the time. The way they present themselves is always like, oh, we are informing you. And often, if you really, you don't even have to read between the lines to see that there is ways that they use to manipulate the words they use to describe someone they don't like. I often use the term, you can say a person's a leader or they're manipulative. You can say something's a religion or a cult. Now, actually, religion and cult is kind of the same thing, really. Not letting the atheist off, because, atheism would fall under the category, too, if you look up the definition in the dictionary. Leadership and manipulation both mean getting someone to do something they normally wouldn't do. Now, of course, the person says, yeah, but leaders do it for the good of the people. Well, you know what? That's what every single dictator who's ever lived on the face of the earth will say to justify what they have done or did. And that is, we're doing it for the good of the body politic or the people. All right? So, really, you have to check what words are used, how a story is presented, and so forth. Oh my gosh, you can just pick up almost any publication nowadays and see the bias. It's overflowing. It's oozing out. If bias were oil, it would be draining off your newspaper, and you could use it to put into a lamp and light your house. Okay? It is really, really apparent nowadays. So anyway, if I was going to rate that one, I would say give that a full 2 points right there when it comes to the media. Okay, number 2, grandiose self-worth. Or in other words, you're like the center of the universe. You are what the sun, moon, and stars circle around. Take a look at these people, especially when they're on television. Okay? Just read the definition of a narcissist. By the way, all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths, okay? Let's just keep that in mind. But you take a look at these people. Look for how they present themselves. Are these people that would even feel comfortable at a bowling alley? A baseball, a minor league baseball game that might take place in your home community? No way, dude. These guys, that would be like, okay, well, can I wash my hands after I go there? For the most part, these people, they may not come directly, some of them do actually, but most of them don't come directly from the upper class. But they identify with them, and they feel that they're very important. The journalists feel that it is their duty to make sure that the people out there get the message that they are putting across. And if anyone questions them, oh my gosh, they must be Russian agents. They must be radicals, either on the far left or the far right. Who would ever question the corporate media? Who would ever question things like, weapons of mass destruction? Oh, people should just trust the corporate media when and remember in those days when they were talking about, leading into the war in Iraq, there wasn't a question so much as to should we go to war. It was a question of what's the best way to go about this. Okay, even the so-called liberal press was doing that. When Obama went after Libya and pretty much destroyed it, and you got a situation now that is still a catastrophe. The media, I remember how the media in America was making this sound like, oh, he's being forced by NATO. This is a NATO action. Excuse me, who's the big player in NATO? All right? Come on. This is like when George Bush had his coalition of the willing or whatever he called it, and almost everyone in it was either American or British. Yeah, he had a few troops from here and there and whatever, but it was pretty much American and then, British troops. So the media distorts. It tends to see itself as the source of all good. I remember, I don't care how you feel about Trump, okay? I really don't. There's people that are on the left that listen to this show and people on the right. But I did see a really funny cartoon. It had a picture, it's a caricature. It had a media person facing Trump, and the media person says, bow and kiss my feet or something in my presence. And Trump says, no. And then in the next caption, it has the media person saying, see how arrogant and self-centered this man is? This really, really does fit the way the media is. And it not just for Trump. I saw the same kind of behavior exercised against the Bernie people earlier last year. So, if you're not part of the club, as George Carlin, put it, I guess you're just not going to have all those same benefits and be seen quite the same way. Okay, so, grandiose self-worth, oh my gosh, all the awards ceremonies they have for each other, and then they broadcast it, on TV and say, look how wonderful we are! Seriously, come on. This is only an invention of Hollywood, and later the media got into it too. This has only been going on, during the 20th century. That people that were like, movie stars, and they're part of this media too, were seen as, these wonderful, tremendous icons. They weren't traditionally. Okay? If your son or daughter said they were going to go into acting, it was like, no, what's going on here? But that changed in the 20th century when you had the media become so pervasive that they were able to tell everyone how wonderful they were. So anyway, on grandiose self-worth, I think for the whole, realm of media, I think we can easily give that 2 points or full credit there. Need for stimulation or proneness to boredom. They turn out stuff that, you have the big issue. It's the earth-shattering event of all time. And then next week, old news. Then it's another big event. This is going to change the way we do everything. Then it's old news. It's and this proneness to boredom that the media displays, how an issue will be front page headlines in the print media, and then it's on page 27 in a few days, and then it just disappears. And also how they focus on the really strange stuff, the bizarre or the weird in many cases. The movie star that's gotten their third navel piercing or whatever. The thing is, this also goes into the population, to where the population never really has time to look at an issue in depth because, no, it's time to go on. It's like a teacher who'd come in and say, let's study this, and then when you open your book and you're reading about the third, you read about 3 paragraphs about the subject, the teacher goes, new subject. You know, and, oh my gosh, it's like ADHD. But this is the way the media operates. Maybe this is why we have ADHD in our society, is because of the way the media tries to play with our minds. Basically, that's a simple one. I think, proneness to boredom, need for stimulation, low discipline, and so forth. I think easy full credit there too. Oh, then we get to pathological lying. How many categories could we make as subsets of this? The media lies or actually, I would not say so much lying outright to your face. They're more like diplomats. A diplomat is supposed to lie to you without actually lying. Okay? They're supposed to tell you to go to hell, and you look forward to the trip. So that means you become a master of the half-truth. A master of the idea that you present a little bit of a fact, but then you distort it a little. I saw this in a publication just today, and it had something about. Actually, I've seen it twice because there was also something that was on a Facebook feed too, some organization. But this media outlet, won't name the name. They made reference to, and they worded it this way, Donald Trump grabbing women's genitalia. Now, here's the problem. The more you repeat something over and over again, the more people believe it. Now, the problem is he was joking about the cult of celebrityness. In fact, actually, he was putting it down, in a sense. Ironic humor, probably not necessarily the most appropriate humor, but it was not talking about an incident. It was talking about something that, if you're a celebrity, you can get away with anything. And tell me, how many of us think that's not true? Okay? Even our sports players. I knew someone who she went to a she wasn't a groupie, but she had a position in which she was invited to a basketball tournament. I mean, not tournament, but the after game party. And this was in one of the big cities and in a big fancy hotel room. And she actually talked about all these young women that were brought in, and essentially it was almost like, some sort of movie where all the young women are just starting to get paired off with. I mean, they're groupies. Their whole thing was to go in there and then be able to say, oh, I did it with this basketball player or something like that. And I've heard this takes place for a lot of sports. I'm not sure about the chess club, but it does. And so this is something that Trump was discussing here, that when you're a celebrity, you get a lot of perks. And the problem is that the way this media outlet presented it was it made it sound like he had actually done it. And so I see this with this whole Russia thing. There's no proof whatsoever that Russia interfered in the U.S. election. And even if they had, they'd just be following the U.S. example. The U.S. has interfered with Israel's election. Didn't work. Benjamin Netanyahu still won. The U.S. interfered in the French elections. We can go back to 1953, where the U.S. actually caused the overthrow of a democratically elected government and changed the course of history forever for Iran and probably much of that region. Okay? America has been meddling in people's affairs for years. And then all of a sudden, it's, like sacrilege if the Russians may have done it. But first of all, I'm just saying, the Russians, there's no proof they did it. All right? There is no proof. There's a lot of innuendo. There's a lot of circumstantial, well, if they had, what if they had done this? But I'm starting to see this trend where the media, without any additional information whatsoever, in fact, actually information should be saying, no, they did not interfere in the U.S. election. But the media is just taking it from they might have to they probably did to, well, we should just accept they did. See, that's the problem with history, because historians maybe in the future will look back on this time, and instead of reporting that in the books about the election being, an American election and so forth, they might actually say, well, Donald Trump was selected by the Russians and so forth. I mean, seriously, you can hate Donald Trump all you want, but he was not an agent of the Kremlin. And then I see these news outlets that try to say alternative media is being controlled by the Kremlin. They haven't contacted me yet. I don't know why. But it's ridiculous. So essentially, if we're talking about pathological lying there, oh my gosh, I wish we could give more points than just 2 on the test. But on pathological lying, we still haven't even dealt with commercials. Okay? Commercials where you use imagery to create a feeling. It's a distorted feeling, but it's still something to sell the product. And you use innuendo, and you try to be creative to make it sound like if you buy this product, it'll solve everything that's ever happened to you. Because we are your friends. I still think it's funny how maybe a woman's magazine will make it sound as if they're champions of feminism and women's causes, and at the same time, they really don't help with the advertising and so forth and the way that they present their covers in presenting women that are actually in existence. I have no problem if you take a picture of a model or models, and that's the real person. But if you send it through a computer generator and you start, lengthening the legs and reducing the tummy fat and doing all these other things to where that person is not the person that was the picture was initially taken of, then you're exploiting and you are lying. Okay? You're giving a false image, especially to young women, and then they go out and they try to buy products so that they can look like that. I think that's reprehensible. And so, this is one area that I really think that people in alternative media should try to make a connection with those feminists that are open to cooperation in regards to analyzing the media instead of everyone fighting each other all the time. There's a lot of common ground out there. But anyway, pathological lying. Give them those points. Cunning and manipulativeness. Oh, the use of deceit, exploitation, and so forth. Oh my gosh. I mean, again, how long would it take you if you were told you have, it was a race. Find a news article that distorts the real situation. How many times have you gone to an event and after the event takes place, you see it covered in the media, be it newspaper or TV, and you're going, what the heck? What is that all about? That's not what happened. And then you think, if the event you went to was distorted, there's a problem that you don't know that about the other things. Maybe you should realize that if that event was distorted, probably every single solitary event they're discussing is going through a distortion filter. Okay? And, essentially it's fake news. If you go in, I've been interviewed by the media many times, and I know how they work. I could tell really quick what they wanted to hear. And if I wanted a soundbite that presented my opinion, and I could make sure that something of what I wanted to convey was going to get through, I knew how to say it. And sure enough, almost every time, voila, it makes it into the media. And ultimately, if you have this, it's pervasive. It's the rule. So cunning and manipulative. I mean, that's just the reality of the game. Okay, now we go. Lack of remorse or guilt. How many times do they apologize? They run a story that is absolutely fake. And where do they usually publish the retraction? At the very bottom of the front page sometimes. Sometimes it's on page 30. And so in broadcast media, it's actually quite rare. So you'll get a big giant headline. I don't know, let's go back to the whole Russia thing. Russia, the alternative media is controlled by the Russians or something like that. And then later they retract it. Well, you've already created the image in people's minds. If you say something and then 3 days later say, I didn't mean it, well, the damage has been done. So ultimately, then, that is a really, really lack of any kind of feelings of guilt. How much guilt do you think the media really felt about really drumming the drums of war for Iraq or for Libya? Okay? Was there this soul-searching and apologies and, well, maybe we were wrong? No. Not at all. I mean, I can't say not at all. I'm sure there's some. But as a body itself, the whole thing should be apologizing. And you don't have that. So lack of remorse or guilt, I think that's pretty simple. And then you get the shallow effect. That's kind of the limited range of depth or feelings. Now, you can act like you're really concerned. Think about the newscaster that's there giving the news, and she's talking about this horrible disaster that killed, 4,000 people in Bangladesh. And then suddenly shifts to a story that has nothing to, that's totally different. And those facial expressions of concern and anguish suddenly it could actually shift to glee. And, oh, what happened today and such, oh, this is wonderful, and so forth. I mean, this is the shallow effect personified. It's the idea that you pretend to care. It's the idea that the press can say, oh, those poor workers that are losing their jobs. Something has to be done. So we should vote for so-and-so or so-and-so and so-and-so who champions policies that hurt those workers. Or we shouldn't look into, or we're really there to help, we're really investigating, we're really digging deep. And then they're not. Okay? This is the shallow effect personified. Now, a callous lack of empathy. Do you really think the media as an industry has much empathy towards people? Do you think they're more interested in making money? They're more interested in selling their products? I would love to see way more whistleblowers than we do see within the media who will come out and say, hey, this is how things really operate. You don't see so much of that. And the problem is that when they get on TV, they know the right words to say that really convey this idea of, hey, we're in this with you. We really care. We love you. I just got this flash in my mind. Have you ever, was it Henry Rollins' music video, Liar? Look it up. That's from the 90s. It's a flashback to the 90s. Henry Rollins' Liar. And that really reminds me to a large degree of how the media operates. And again, they pretend to care. I really don't think they do, even when they do these things to help the poor or disadvantaged or whatever. I wonder what it would be like if they just did it privately instead of, making sure the cameras are on or so forth. I think in the Bible, it actually says that you should help people and you should do it in a private manner, so that you're not bringing praise upon yourself. You're bringing praise upon you're getting your praise from God. You're not wanting to show yourself as being wonderful and better than anyone else. Pride so to speak. Oh my gosh, they have a lot of pride. And actually, I've heard it said that pride and empathy cannot exist side by side with each other, and I think that's actually true. Parasitic lifestyle? Well, I guess we could talk about commercials. You know, and we could go on and on and on. I mean, you could do 15 different shows on commercials and their effects on people's self-image. The nagging of, what is it called? The nag factor, you know, getting kids to bug their parents to buy a certain toy or go to a certain vacation spot. All these kinds of things. And I would say that's actually quite parasitic. They couldn't exist without the ad dollars. All right? And of course that's true for all businesses. But the nature of media itself that they present is one that they inform, that they're the fourth estate, that they're necessary, and they're indispensable. When in reality, they're just trying to find sensational stuff to catch your eye. Or they're trying to create eye candy, you know, with celebrities hanging out of their dresses at awards events. Or they're trying to promote their particular agenda from the corporations that own them. You know, these corporations, they're not just sitting there. They have their owners. So they have to kind of, you know, it's ratings, but it's also who is behind the scenes too. Poor behavior controls. Well, take a look at how entertainment has gone in recent years. Okay? The kinds of movies, I saw a headline where there's some new movie that is supposed to be so violent that, you know, people are encouraged to be careful, they might throw up or something during it. I mean, this seems like an industry that we see violence and we see gratuitous sexuality or sexual situations. Not stuff that really pertains to necessarily the plot. It's just thrown in to titillate and so forth. And in that sense, I think that would tend to show that there's a poor behavioral control over their industry. Now, there may be rating systems and there may be self-censorship, but it always seems to be creeping a little bit further. It's always like, you know, the two countries that are hostile to each other, and in international waters, they'll let their boat go just a little bit closer to someone else's island and see what they can get away with before they get attacked. Or when the radar gets locked on, and so they can say, okay, that's the extent, that's the limit of their radar. This is the way the media operates. And again, they make it sound, you know, if you're called creative or innovative, if you're someone who produces a TV show or a movie or something that, you know, what would you say, is provocative, that causes people to be uncomfortable. Well, the problem is with this is that what's provocative and really, you know, disturbing this year becomes less disturbing next year. It's a process called desensitization in the media. No, I mean in psychology. And the more you get of something, the less it actually affects you. And then finally you're at a point where you're just sitting there munching on chips and watching something that maybe 5 years ago you'd have been like, oh, there is no way I would ever watch such a thing. Or you're letting your kids watch things on a show and say, well, honey, you know, the wife or the husband says, are we sure that the kids should be watching this? And say, well, honey, it's got high ratings. A lot of people are watching, I guess. Yeah, let them watch it. And, you know, they've got some sort of sex scenes taking place that, you know, I mean, you know, kids are like 12 or 13 watching it. So, and then we get into promiscuous sexual behavior. Well, trademark of Hollywood, isn't it? The media doesn't, shy away from these things either. I mean, there's a lot of media that they're quick to report, on, wardrobe malfunction for this young starlet at awards ceremony. A lot of times they'll blur it, but still, it's caught the person's attention. Believe me, it's going to get a lot more views than their article on the IMF operations in Latin America. Okay, so sex sells, and the media knows better than to really oversaturate the market. So there's you only push it to a certain edge. I mean, pretty soon, if everything was like some people thought it would be in the 60s, that everyone would be running around naked on TV and there'd be sex and all this kind of stuff, that would bore the audience, and they would eventually whatever. And and so there would be no further levels to take it. So you keep it at a level that still makes it, you got that wonderful mix of puritanicalism and hedonism, and that keeps the ratings up. So anyway, promiscuous sexual behavior. Watch your average primetime show nowadays. They don't show the stuff, that you might see if you watch things on cable networks. They don't show it. But come on, it's basically presented. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Well, I would actually say that if the media really examined itself for what it's doing to the public mind, and they looked at it really in an empathetic, caring way, I think they would change many of the things that they do. But instead they don't. So, that's a lack of realistic long-term goal, at least for the country. Impulsivity. Again, we've talked about this already. The idea that, there's not, you present things and then there's, not this kind of looking at what the long-term effects are. How is this going to affect viewers? Are we role models? I've heard that said many times for the media. Are we really role models? Well, in reality, they shouldn't be. But again, in reality, they are. Okay? People look up to movie stars, especially young people. And sometimes when the movie stars or the people in high places are behaving in ways that are negative, it's almost like giving a license to the people that they can act the same way. Doesn't seem to affect her or him. Anyway, then we go into irresponsible. Now again, we've already kind of dealt with this. And the next criteria, failure to accept responsibility for the actions. Look at where this could take us. There's the media now is so focused on negativity in our political world, in our economics, and so forth, that it takes attention away from them. But at the same time, it's not impossible to analyze, present your view, and do so with facts and good reasoning. All right? It's not impossible. But that's not being used so much. It's almost as if it was propaganda. In fact, actually, I would say it is propaganda. That's where you cross the line, really, where you see your audience not as fellow citizens, but as targets for your information. And I think that's where our media is in America today. Again, they are still sensitive to their viewers. They still don't want to, liberal networks don't want to lose conservative viewers. Conservative networks don't want to lose liberal. And they all have an overlap. But they are still going further and further into this irresponsibility of basically just throwing out I was about to say garbage, but in a sense it would be. If you don't give information in an unbiased manner, in an analytical manner, meaning that you fairly present at least two sides. Now, you can be argued maybe you should present more than just two, but at least two sides fairly presented. Then you don't have analysis. Then you are just basically a tool of whoever is your owner, whoever controls the message ultimately. And so I think I've actually gone for more than 13, haven't I? Yeah, I don't know if we could say criminal versatility or whatever, but essentially, these are the characteristics that are often listed for psychopathy. And I think it'd be quite easy as an institution to say that the mainstream media does behave quite psychopathically. And when we keep that in mind, and also keep in mind the damage that psychopaths can do in, human relationships where you have a one-on-one situation, you can't overestimate the damage that can be done when you have an all-pervasive media machine that is pretty much an oligopoly and touches every person, well, in America, in the Western world, and to a large degree, the entire Earth. So I think once we keep that in mind, once we can integrate that, then at least we have a discernment when it comes to media. And the more we expose what's going on that's wrong, because I don't think the media is beyond salvaging. I think that it just needs to gain some sanity, and the only way it's going to gain sanity is if the readers, if the viewers demand accountability. Because if you do, then you're going to see changes. You're going to see more balance, and you're going to see less of this innuendo taking place. The self-regulation can be imposed. Okay? The people that make up the media, there are many of them that have good intentions. There are many who they may not have good intentions, but at least the bottom line being the dollar, they're going to want to keep their ratings high so they make more money. It doesn't do you any good if you're not out there making some money and you're throwing out your information to try to sway the people. It's a business. So I would encourage people to keep this in mind, share this message. We got to get this out there so that we can get the media to return to kind of those ideals that we thought it really represented back in the 1950s, where you did have investigative journalism, and even in the 60s when you had investigative journalism, even through the Watergate era and so forth. Somewhere along the line, and maybe it was the first Gulf War, when the government started really interfering with the media, or when we had deregulation, which started concentrating the media all into just some small oligopolies. Maybe it started there. Who knows? Or maybe it just started when we all stopped caring anymore and just ignored it and didn't give feedback and protest and so forth. Nevertheless, wherever it started from, we got to turn it around if we want to continue to have a functional democracy. Or else, history does not look favorably upon cultures when they just start, all the various groups start going after each other. And usually you have someone come along who has all the answers, and then, things get really bad.